Hey, Joe here from Home Studio Corner. I want to tackle something that I think needs to be addressed. A lot of people want to know, how do I take a mono track, so a single channel track, and make it sound stereo? And then a lot of people give this advice, and I just think it's bad advice, and there are better alternatives to get a wider sound that don't involve doing this thing. So let me show you this thing first, show you the bad advice, and then I'll show you some alternatives that I think work infinitely better, okay? All right, we've got a track in front of us. This is from my EP, which is called Rain. This is from the song Help Me, and just a mono acoustic guitar track that sounds like this. Sounds delightful. You could totally make a great sounding record with just that sound and a vocal and the whole thing be mono. That's an option, but if you're wanting to go wider, there are some options for you. But here's the bad advice. What people will tell you to do. They'll say, first, you need to duplicate the track. Woink. So now I've got two copies of the same thing. We'll call this AG for acoustic guitar, dupe. Then they'll say, here's what you do next. Take one track and pan it left. Take the other one and pan it to the right. Okay, so far, we haven't really done anything. We've literally only made it louder. It's still mono because there's two identical signals, one panned left, one panned right. That is still mono, as you can hear. It's mono, just now louder because there's two of them. The way to get that separation, and the idea is, what makes something stereo is you have something different coming out of the left speaker than the right. Doesn't have to be vastly different, it just needs to be a little different, and our ears discern that, and that creates this sense of width. Okay? So the advice, the bad advice, is to come over into your system and to delay one of the guitars. So to literally push it to the right in time so that they are no longer lined up. Now you can do that by zooming in really closely and just moving one to the right, or you can get even nerdier about it and you can come over here. And if your system, most DAWs that I've seen have some sort of spot like this that allows you to adjust some of the settings on an individual track. And where is it? I never use this. There it is, delay. I can delay one side by, let's say, 30 milliseconds. So I've taken the duplicated track and I've said, push it back in time by 30 milliseconds. They're panned left and right. Let's see what that sounds like. Initially, you think, oh, hey, look, I took a mono track and I made it stereo. Here's the problem. Phase. I'm going to talk about that more in a second. But listen, legitimately listen. Here's one track. And then here's the two tracks, doubled and one delayed in the fake stereo arrangement. The place where this starts to fall apart is right at this little tiny button down here. You see that button? I don't know if you can see it. That is the mono button. That allows me to take the mix and listen to the whole thing in mono. Listen to what happens to the acoustic guitars with this fake stereo treatment when I go to mono. I'll start it off in stereo, then I'll flip to mono. What do you hear? It sounds tinny, it sounds thin, all the low frequencies are gone, and it just sounds bad. Now, you may ask, okay, well, everyone's going to listen on headphones. Why does it matter if it sounds like that in mono? Well, any place you listen, unless you are directly between two speakers or listening on headphones, you're experiencing that song in different variations of mono. Listening to a song in your car, you can hear a little bit of panning, but you're mostly hearing in mono because by the time the sound bounces off the seat and the window and everything else, you're hearing it all kind of in a jumbled mess, which makes it sound mono. The bigger picture is, if your mix sounds bad in mono, it's going to sound bad at other systems when you play it. If it sounds good in mono and good in stereo, that's the big secret. Doing this does not allow your mix to sound good in mono, and it just doesn't sound good overall. Now, what's happening here? There's a thing called phase. Phased means if you have two sources, two pieces of audio of the same performance, if one is delayed a little bit, then certain frequencies get canceled out, okay? If something is 180 degrees completely out of phase with another copy of that track, you get silence. If it's partially out of phase, you get certain frequencies that get cut. What that ends up sounding like is thin, Or specifically in stereo, when you're listening like this, it sounds like the mix has gone sideways. Like it makes you kind of want to tilt your head or turn your head to the side. One way to see that visually is to put a phase meter on your master bus. A phase meter lets you see the correlation between the left and the right channels. So is one side pushing and one side pulling? And if so, that's gonna make it sound funny, which is what we have here. So here is what a mono track up the middle looks like on a phase meter. Two things to note. Number one, you don't see any stereo image at all. It's just one solid vertical line, which means it's mono. You also see this correlation meter across the bottom is pointing to the right. It's in the positive, which is what you want. Look at what happens when I hit play on this fake stereo track that we've created. I'll even mute the audio. You can just see as soon as I hit play, watch. This is going to go over here to the left to the negative. There it goes. And it has occasionally it bounces back to the positive, but for the most part, while the image looks all stereo, it's spending the most of its time in the negative, which doesn't sound right. Again, here's what that sounds like. I've seen so many people do this, and a lot of people give this advice. I just don't think it's great advice. It causes phase problems, and it just doesn't sound that good. It may sound a little bit better to your ears in stereo until you realize what you're listening to is something that's out of phase, which makes it not sound very good. All right, so what is an alternative? Let's delete this second track because it just makes me anxious. What's an alternative? If I'm going to tell you what the problem is, do I have a solution? Yeah, the solution is something you probably don't want to hear, but the single best way to take a mono track and to make it sound amazing in stereo is to record it a second time. Sometimes we call that a double. So you take a second guitar, you set up the microphone a second time, and you record on a second track, which is what I have here. This happens to be two guitars playing somewhat of the same part. One is actually capoed up, the other one is in regular tuning, but played together, panned left and right, it gives you a huge stereo image that has zero phase problems because it is two completely different, separate, independent recordings that will not cause phase problems. Here's what that sounds like. They're two separate tracks. Everything sounds nice and big and wide. There are so many differences in the individual timing of the two performances that it gives a stereo image. And it sounds way better than the alternative. If we flip this to mono, it still sounds pretty good. It's not as fun, right? It's not as helpful in mono, but it doesn't lose all the low end like the other one did. It doesn't sound like I'm playing inside a tin can like it did the other way when we took the track and then delayed one of them, okay? So if you're gonna go, the best way to get a stereo sound is to record it twice and pan one left and one right. That's just the way it is. Or maybe put the guitar left and record a piano to the right. There are lots of options to expand your stereo spectrum in your mix that don't involve duplicating a track and pushing it back. It's just a lazier approach that doesn't work very well, doesn't sound very good, and you can always add something new that would work infinitely better. All right, that's it for me. Thanks so much for watching. If you want more stuff like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel on YouTube and also check out my recording cheat sheet over at recordingcheatsheet.com, which is really difficult to say. Should be a link below. I'm out of here. See ya.